Hello, A-Framers. Well, today I'm excited to announce that we have completed the dual-sided feature for transactions. So now, if the agent represents both sides, you can now mark it as a dual-sided transaction. The statistics will be correct, and you can, of course, add the buyer and seller to the same record. So let's go ahead and demonstrate how this would work. So I'm going to click into test drive, but you could certainly create a new transaction from scratch and automatically enter the buyer and seller at the same time. But typically, this scenario might happen when you have the listing already and then you get a contract from the current agent and you realize, oh, this is a dual-sided transaction, so I might as well add them to the listing here. So let's go ahead and click into this transaction detail record, and I'll kind of show you how this works. So right now we just have a seller, John Doe. We of course have the agent, Burton Rhodes, and we're going to go ahead and convert this to a dual-sided transaction. First thing we want to do is select the dual side. So this just tells A-Frame that we're working on both ends of the transaction. Of course, when something goes under contract, we'll need to enter a contract price. And we'll go ahead and change this to an under contract status. And then there's a couple other things you have to do, which you're certainly used to if you used A-Frame for any amount of time. The first thing is we need an effective date. Let's say we put it under contract yesterday. We're probably going to need a closing date. We can do that at the end of the month, next month. And then participants. So now participants is where we're going to add the buyer here. Now, before this change, a lot of times you might add the other party here in this field under the contract tab. But since we are representing both sides, most likely you're going to want to enter the buyer or the person on the other side as a full contact, so you can track this person and do all the features that you could use for a participant. So we've got these, the seller and the buyer added. And then last but not least, you're probably going to want to pay attention to payouts if you track these. Now that we're getting paid on both sides of the transaction, you're probably going to want to change your commission percentage to whatever that is, let's say 6%. And then the actual gross is going to be essentially double. Then we'll click Save. And you'll notice now, since it's a dual transaction, you see this demarcation of the D. And then it's going to show the seller and the buyer at the top because we do represent both sides. And also you'll notice under the Participants tab that both the seller and buyer now have access to a buyer and seller portal. Now there is something that you really need to keep in mind. In dual transactions, we only have one portal for the buyer and seller. So the buyer and seller for this transaction are going to see the exact same data. This is important because if you have transactions or attachments or documents that you really only want to show to one side or the other, then and you use the portals, then the buyer and seller portals may not be the best option for you, and you might want to go back to just doing both sides separately. But for those of you who organize their transactions in a way where it's okay that both of them would access the same data and also you actually use the buyer and seller portal, then dual transaction does make sense in that scenario. Okay, if I go back to my dashboard, last but not least, you'll notice that test drive is here. You'll see the D for the side, and it also will label out which one is the seller and which one is the buyer under the buyer and seller column. Last thing I'll point out on this is merge fields do work, especially when it comes to combining multiple roles. So for example, typically in a transaction, if you wanted to put, let's say, all emails, then all emails is actually going to combine the buyer and seller. Also, if I did first names, for example, that's going to combine the buyer and seller together. So this enables your email templates to use merge fields that combine not just all of the sellers or all of the buyers, but you can combine all of the parties that are either the sell side or the buy side, depending on what you choose, seller, buyer, or dual. Hopefully that makes sense, but it just gives you some flexibility when creating email templates. Okay, we've got some other fun things coming over the next week or two in regards to task templates and how they can sort of be used in this new dual-sided transaction status. But hope you guys have fun with this. I hope this is helpful to many of you. And as always, if you need help, email us at support@aframesoftware.com. Thanks.